Recap Tales of Herding Gods, Chapter 445, Chapter Translator Nine Tails, Editor Dark Gem. When the meteorological phenomenon shifted violently at the end of the founding Emperor era, the sun ship and moon ship, divine vessels forged by the gods of that ancient age, were summoned forth to dispel the engulfing darkness. Their radiance allowed crops to grow and life to flourish once more, enabling humanity to endure beneath the heavens. Yet these two celestial ships were not merely instruments of survival. They were peerless weapons of war. When the Sun Guardian aboard the Sun ship and the Moon Guardian upon the Moon ship stirred the immense power sleeping within the vessels, the energy they wielded would surge until it rivaled the might of heavenly gods themselves. With such overwhelming force at their command, they possessed the terrifying ability to overturn heaven and earth. Qin Mu had once commanded the Sun ship and had also borrowed the Moon ship before, and thus he understood clearly the extraordinary and terrifying power contained within those two divine vessels. Through the secrets of dragon control recorded in the dragon-rearing scriptures, he could borrow the strength of the divine Flood Dragon King and its kin. By doing so, he could open his divine bridge and allow his primordial spirit to ascend toward the celestial heavens. However, even then, he could only step through the southern heavenly gates, unable to venture deeper into the boundless heavens beyond. By contrast, if he were to borrow the power of the Sun ship or Moon ship, his spirit could ascend even further, reaching the Jade Pavilion that stood beside the sacred Jade Lake. Yet even such overwhelming divine vessels possessed a fatal weakness, and that weakness was the 10,000 spirit nature technique. The Sun ship lent its power to the Sun Guardians, and the Moon ship bestowed its strength upon the Moon Guardians. But that immense power did not originate from the Guardians themselves. Instead, it flowed from the bodies of the two divine ships. The vessels contained boundless and terrifying energy within them, and with the sun or moon forged by gods as their source of power, they were able to drive away the eternal darkness. The 10,000 spirit nature technique, however, followed the philosophy that all things possess spirit and all things possess soul. By relying upon a practitioner's perception of nature, spirits could be created and awakened. Everything beneath heaven and earth could be stirred into consciousness and summoned to fight. If a god cultivated the 10,000 spirit nature technique, that god could awaken the spirits dwelling within the Sun ship and Moon ship themselves, and command those vessels to turn against their own masters. If such a calamity occurred, then what awaited the Sun Guardians and Moon Guardians, as well as the Sun Herders and Moon Herders, would be nothing less than a brutal massacre soaked in blood. Even the Guardians themselves would have no hope of escape. Many years ago, there must have been a terrifying battle here. The Sun ships and Moon ships must have encountered a god who cultivated the 10,000 spirit nature technique. That battle must have ended with the ships being destroyed one after another. Qin Mu turned his gaze toward the distant west, and his eyes flickered like a candle flame trembling in a cold wind. And West Earth's true heaven palace, it must be connected to all of this. He had always regarded West Earth's true heaven palace as a sacred ground similar to the Great Thunderclap Monastery or the Tao sect. Yet, even though the palace master possessed impressive divine arts, she was merely a powerful practitioner trapped within the divine bridge realm. From the surface, her sacred ground seemed no different from the other sacred lands of the world. However, judging from what he had discovered now, West Earth's true heaven palace was likely hiding countless secrets, and perhaps even an existence so terrifying that it defied imagination. Furthermore, the very name True Heaven Palace gave rise to deeper speculation. The Heavenly Saint cult derived its name from the teachings imparted by the woodcutter, who was revered as a saint. The Great Thunderclap Monastery earned its title because Mount Meru pierced the thunderclouds themselves. When thunder roared and the voices of Buddhas echoed together, the sound was so mighty that even the deaf could hear it. The Tao sect was renowned for its Tao sword and Kunlun mountain, while Little Jade Capital was a fragment of the Jade Capital from the founding Emperor era. The names of the sea sacred grounds each hinted at their origins. But what was the origin of True Heaven Palace? Why had the god of True Heaven Palace destroyed the sun ships and moon ships? The shattered divine palace buried beneath the deserts and sand, the strange and giants wandering the wasteland. Those things were probably the work of that same god. And what of the blazing desert flames that covered the land, flames that left burning markings upon the abandoned people and attempted to incinerate them alive? Were those flames also connected to the true heaven palace? But then why would those flame markings appear only on the abandoned people who stepped upon this land? Why were only the abandoned people of the great ruins burned to death, while others could touch the flames without feeling the slightest pain? How many hidden secrets lay buried within West Earth? The flaming desert roared fiercely around Chin Mu, its scorching heat pressing heavily against his skin. Suddenly another ruin appeared before them. Even before the dragon Qilin could draw closer, violent winds began stirring the sand around the ruins. The grains gathered together rapidly, forming a towering sand giant. Beside it, another massive figure was beginning to take shape. Sandstorms twisted violently around their feet. The dragon Qilin prepared to change direction and avoid the danger, but Chin Mu spoke calmly. "No need. Continue straight ahead." With no choice, the dragon Qilin rushed forward toward the sand giants that were radiating murderous intent. Within Chin Mu's eyes, formation markings swirled as he carefully examined the ruin from afar. The sand giants surged forward, drawing closer and closer. Suddenly, a sharp hum of a sword echoed across the desert. Carefree sword flashed through the air, skimming along the desert floor as it rushed forward. As it passed, a powerful whirlwind erupted and swept up countless grains of sand. The sand giants advanced until they were about 100 miles away from the dragon Qilin, and then abruptly collapsed. The desert sand surged violently outward. The dragon Qilin immediately released a thunderous roar, scattering the collapsing dunes. Chin Mu summoned the carefree sword back to his side, while the dragon Qilin carried him into the ruins. There, within the shattered shrine, lay a statue of a god that had been sliced into roughly 8 separate pieces. The dragon Qilin quietly floated away. We should be able to enter West Earth by tomorrow afternoon. Upon a broken sunship, Chin Mu lit a bonfire and allowed the dragon Qilin and Xiongqie to rest. He himself could still endure the journey, but the dragon Qilin had been running for far too long and needed to recover its strength. Xiongqie was still young, and the harsh travel had been difficult for her to endure as well. Chin Mu gazed toward the distant west. His eyes passed through the strange flames dancing across the desert. Within those flames, a figure appeared far away. Chin Mu smiled faintly and raised his hand in greeting. The distant figure was startled by the gesture and immediately turned to flee. "Grandmaster's courage grows smaller and smaller," Chin Mu said with a burst of laughter. Pan Gong So stepped away from the broken sunship, his expression flickering between light and shadow. He had already reattached his severed arm, and most of the injuries he had suffered were now healed. Even so, he still could not find an opportunity to sneak close to Chin Mu. It was not that he had never considered launching a sneak attack or confronting Chin Mu head-on. But after calculating the chances of victory and realizing they were not favorable, he could only force himself to abandon those ideas. He considered leaving. But suddenly he noticed sand flowing silently across the surrounding desert, and his heart trembled slightly. He quickly looked toward the flames. The desert night was not entirely dark. The strange flames illuminated the land with a faint glow. In the distance, Pan Gong So spotted a strange human-shaped figure slowly walking toward him. It resembled a wooden puppet, and its joints twisted unnaturally as it moved with an eerie gait. The sand beneath the puppet's feet flowed quietly in rhythm with its steps. Strangely, despite the flowing sand, not a single sound could be heard. Pan Gong So's heart leaped into his throat when he noticed another wooden puppet emerging behind the first. Then came a third, and a fourth. When they drew closer, he finally realized that those eerie figures were not puppets at all. They were wooden god statues. Yet their eyes were not carved from wood. Those eyes were real. At that moment, the statues were silently approaching the sunship. Pan Gong So's heart pounded violently. One of the wooden god statues suddenly turned its head toward him and revealed a strange, unsettling smile. It lifted a wooden finger and placed it beside its mouth in a silent gesture for him to remain quiet. Pan Gong So blinked, but remained completely still, silently watching the god statues approach the sun ship. The flowing sand surged upward, lifting the wooden statues into the air. The mass of sand beneath them continued swelling larger and larger. Pan Gong So grew increasingly nervous. At the same time, his fists tightened with a certain excitement. Around the sun ship, enormous sand giants had already sealed off every direction of escape. They raised their massive fists high into the air, preparing to smash the sun ship where Qin Mu was resting. That Qin brat is finished. Pan Gong So felt so excited that he nearly shouted in delight. At that very moment, a streak of silver sword light shot across the darkness. The blade pierced straight through the head of a wooden god statue. It exploded instantly. Then the second statue exploded, then the third, then the fourth. As the explosions echoed across the desert, the arms of the sand giants froze in mid-air before collapsing into flowing sand that buried half of the sun ship beneath the dunes. "Fight with me?" A cold sneer came from within the ship. Pan Gong So no longer hesitated. He turned and left immediately. "There's no chance of success when scheming against this brat," he thought bitterly. But why would an abandoned person like him come to West Earth? Is he seeking death? The master behind those wooden god statues. I know her. We met once before, though it is not a memory I enjoy recalling. Heh. Qin brat, even if I want to kill you, why would I need to do it myself? He smiled faintly. Besides, even without borrowing her power, I still have several old acquaintances in West Earth. Killing you will be far too easy. Rascal, you dared oppose me? After you die, I will make your corpse kneel and grovel before me. By the next afternoon, the dragon Qilin finally emerged from the desert. The flame markings on Qin Mu's body gradually faded away. They soon arrived at a border town of West Earth. The streets were filled with men and women wearing embroidered headbands. Their clothing glittered with gold and silver ornaments. Those of higher status wore elaborate silver headdresses sculpted into phoenixes and vermilion birds. Most of their garments were dyed red or black, shining brilliantly to the eyes. There were many beautiful young women among the people, while the men generally looked plain and simple. The moment the trio stepped into the town, Xiong Jie began whining loudly about wanting to eat sour fish, chili bones, rice flour noodles, and drink bug poop tea. She had been away from her homeland for more than half a year, and the thought of tasting the delicacies of West Earth again filled her with uncontrollable excitement. She wanted to eat everything at once. West Earth used gold and silver for trade, so Qin Mu had brought some along and allowed the girl to eat as much as she wished. Qin Mu also sampled the local dishes. The cuisine of West Earth leaned heavily towards sour and spicy flavors, creating a taste quite different from that of Eternal Peace. However, he did not dare try the bug poop tea. That tea was brewed from the droppings of insects that fed on tea leaves. Although the tea possessed an unexpectedly rich fragrance, Qin Mu still felt a little terrified. Grandpa Apothecary enjoys drinking tea. I should bring some back for him to try, Qin Mu thought. Afterward, he examined the surrounding town carefully. The architecture of West Earth differed greatly from that of Eternal Peace. The customs and environment were entirely distinct. But the strangest feature was the houses. The homes were constructed from wood and shaped into circular structures. Many buildings had signboards mounted above their entrances, and upon those boards hung small statues of gods. After asking about it, Qin Mu learned that those statues existed to prevent people from using spells to awaken spirits. Because the spells of West Earth followed the path that all things possess spirit and all things possess soul, if a divine arts practitioner cast a spell and a house suddenly sprang to its feet and ran away, would that not leave the entire family homeless and freezing? Only when a god statue was worshipped within the house would the structure remain safe from being summoned away by divine arts practitioners. Qin Mu blinked at the explanation. The idea of an entire cluster of houses standing up and charging into battle was certainly a fresh and strange sight. But could those god statues truly prevent houses from being stolen away by divine arts practitioners? There are also countless shrines built on the mountains to suppress mountain spirits, and every river has its own divine shrine to prevent divine arts practitioners from taking it away, an elder explained. However, Those mountains and rivers all belong to someone. Qin Mu glanced around and clicked his tongue in amazement. Looking toward the distant mountain ranges, he finally understood why the landscape of West Earth had not been stripped bare. Verdant hills and clear waters still filled the land, forming a breathtaking scenery. Why do all the mountains and rivers here have owners? Qin Mu asked. Who do they belong to? They naturally belong to the masters of True Heaven Palace. Some also belong to divine arts practitioners from certain sects or territories, the elder replied. Not only do the mountains and rivers have owners, every flower, blade of grass, and tree has an owner as well. They cannot be touched carelessly. Otherwise, even selling yourself into servitude would not be enough to repay the debt. Just as he finished speaking, the ground trembled slightly. The surrounding people became alarmed and quickly moved aside. Qin Mu turned toward the source of the disturbance and saw an enormous tree walking toward them. Standing atop the tree was a woman holding a painted scroll. She shouted loudly, "An escapee from the Great Ruins entered West Earth today. True Heaven Palace has issued an order to capture this fugitive. Come, hang this portrait up." Translator, Nine Tails. Dark Gem. The woman was clad in garments as dark as midnight, black top, black skirt, while silver ornaments shimmered upon her head like cold moonlight. More than a dozen silver bracelets circled her wrists, each hung with tiny bells that chimed softly when she moved. Her bearing carried a solemn authority. Soon after, a person stepped forward and took the portrait from her hands before hanging it upon the announcement board for all to see. The woman from True Heaven Palace gazed down upon the gathered crowd from her elevated position and spoke in a clear voice. "This fugitive from the Great Ruins is of utmost importance. Within the next few days he will pass through the flaming desert, so all of you must remain vigilant. If you happen to spot him, do not create a disturbance lest he become alerted." Xiong Jie wished to rush forward for a closer look, yet Qin Mu reached out and seized her small hand gently, preventing the little girl from getting lost in the throng. A dense crowd had already gathered before the announcement board, packed so tightly it was nearly impossible to pass through. Yet Xiong Jie still managed to squeeze her way forward while dragging Qin Mu behind her. When he finally lifted his head, he saw his own likeness painted upon the portrait. Above it were the words, "Great Ruins Fugitive Qin Mu." Xiong Jie's eyes widened with both surprise and delight. "Fatty Dragon, you're standing beside Big Brother in the picture too. Only I'm missing." The bustling clamour of the crowd vanished in an instant. Silence fell over the surroundings like frost. All eyes turned toward Qin Mu. He appeared completely oblivious to the sudden shift in atmosphere. Instead, he studied the painting with a faint smile. This must be Pan Gong So's handiwork. He personally painted it. Xing'an once had a portrait of me that Pan Gong So drew as well, so I can recognize his brushstrokes. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the area emptied. The crowd scattered in all directions, retreating as far away from him as possible. Qin Mu paid no attention to the commotion and continued smiling calmly. Grandmaster certainly has a vast network of friends and acquaintances. What a pity he ran too quickly. I didn't manage to kill him. Great Ruins fugitive, die! An enraged shout erupted behind him. A gust of wind followed as a tree man lifted its colossal feet and stomped toward him. The tree man was immensely heavy, and the power it wielded was formidable. In West Earth, where trees were plentiful and inexpensive, divine arts practitioners often used such tree men, both as transportation and as weapons in battle. Yet the tree man chosen by the female disciple of True Heaven Palace was clearly of an extraordinary breed. Its branches, trunk, and leaves were crimson like fresh blood, and its body bore the aura of countless battles fought in the past. Qin Mu extended his hand and made a grasping motion. Instantly, a sphere of green light flew out from within the tree man's body. The gigantic creature froze where it stood. Qin Mu had extracted the tree's soul. Xiong Shiyu had once imparted to him the 10,000 spirit nature technique. Although he felt the technique was not as easy for men to cultivate as it was for women, he had still invested considerable effort in practicing it. The disciple of True Heaven Palace was startled. The silver ornaments on her head suddenly shot into the air, transforming into a silver phoenix that rushed fiercely toward Qin Mu. At the same time, the silver bracelets around her wrists flew forward to bind around his head. Flames burst forth around Chin-Moo's body. Before the silver phoenix and bracelets could even reach him, they melted instantly into a puddle of molten metal. Seeing that the situation had turned unfavorable, the female disciple of True Heaven Palace immediately turned to flee. Her garments fluttered as if alive and lifted her body upward, allowing her to soar through the air without even casting a flying spell. 10,000 spirit nature technique is truly miraculous. Even the clothes can carry someone through the sky, Chin-Moo said with admiration. It seems I have still underestimated this technique. The woman gave a muffled grunt as she suddenly fell from the sky. Big trouble, the crowd cried as they fled in panic in every direction. A lowly man is going to kill a female master. Chin-Moo glanced around and realized the entire street had become deserted. The doors and windows of every house were tightly shut. Not a single person remained in sight. Only the dragon Qilin and Xiong Qie stood beside him, while the female disciple of True Heaven Palace lay sprawled upon the ground, stunned from her fall. "Do you know the way to True Heaven Palace?" Chin-Moo asked her with a friendly expression. The female disciple suddenly flipped forward. The hairpins in her head shot toward Chin-Moo's eyes like flying swords. In the same instant, she darted toward a nearby house and raised her hand to pluck down the god statue mounted up on its inscribed board. Boom! The house suddenly rose upright and transformed into a towering giant. The two small rooms became enormous fists that crashed down upon Chin-Moo. The hairpins shorted the moment they neared Chin-Moo's eyes. The formations engraved within them whirled rapidly, before the hairpins melted into droplets of liquid silver. Chin-Moo raised his head slightly. Star-like lights shimmered within his eyes and swept toward the house giant. Through one of the windows, she could see an entire family trembling inside, too terrified to move. I already knew these god statues were useless. Two beams of light shot forth from his eyes and swept past the female disciple of True Heaven Palace. His voice was calm and indifferent. As divine arts practitioners, you show no regard for ordinary people. I despise you. The beams gradually shortened before withdrawing back into his eyes. The formations that had been spinning wildly vanished, and the starry lights slowly dimmed. The house giant crashed down and returned to its original form, a round, ordinary house. Chin-Moo turned to leave while the woman remained frozen upon the roof, not daring to move. Just as Chin-Moo lifted Xiong Qie and leapt onto the dragon Qilin's back, the sound of a door creaking open echoed from below. The female disciple of True Heaven Palace revealed a look of horror and spoke in a trembling whisper. "Don't open the door. Creak." The door slowly opened wider. The woman screamed in panic. "Don't open the door." Her vital qi suddenly failed to stabilize her body. Thin lines of blood appeared across her neck and waist. Two pieces of flesh slid apart from her waist and dropped to the street below. Soon after, her two legs fell from the roof. "Cult Master is truly benevolent," the dragon Qilin exclaimed with admiration as they left the small town behind. That woman was so ruthless, yet Cult Master. Before he could finish speaking, the woman's screams echoed faintly from behind. The dragon Qilin turned his head back and just happened to witness the horrifying sight of her lower body falling away. A shiver ran down his spine. Chin-Moo sighed softly. "I'm not benevolent. For divine arts practitioners to harm ordinary people is already a taboo. We are all human. How can we recklessly take lives simply because we possess greater strength? When I was in Eternal Peace Empire and the Great Ruins, battles between divine arts practitioners rarely involved the innocent. Even when I fought Pangong So, we fought outside the city. When Granny C battled the Lord of Border Dragon City, she fought high in the sky instead of unleashing destruction among the common folk in the streets." The dragon Qilin closed his mouth and said nothing further. Originally, he had wanted to praise Chin-Moo's mercy for sparing the female disciple of True Heaven Palace. Yet he had not expected that she would ultimately perish by Chin-Moo's hand anyway. The benevolence Chin-Moo spoke of was meant only for ordinary people. Ever since childhood, Chin-Moo had been raised by the 9 elders of Disabled Elderly Village. From them he had learned both through instruction and through example. Though he bore the title of Heavenly Devil Cult Master, he still possessed a clear understanding of right and wrong. On that point alone, he had already surpassed many so-called righteous individuals from prestigious sects. Chie should know the direction of True Heaven Palace, right? Qin Mu asked. Xiong Chie shook her head. My mother brought me out to escape pursuit, so we travelled through many desolate places. I don't remember the path back. Qin Mu pondered silently for a moment before speaking. Fatty Dragon, let's follow the official road. When we reach a large city, we can ask for directions. The people there should know where True Heaven Palace lies. The Dragon Qilin followed the official road for dozens of miles. Gradually, more and more travellers appeared along the route. The road was broad and smooth, far superior to those found in Eternal Peace. Beside the road flowed a river so clear that its bottom could be seen plainly. Fish, turtles, and snakes swam within its waters, and none of them were small. Divine arts practitioners and martial artists hurried along the river's surface as well. Women were the majority, though there were also quite a few men. The techniques cultivated by these people likely followed the path that all things possessed spirits and all things possessed souls. Some of the women and men would stop upon the river's surface and call out to the waters. Instantly waves would surge upward and propel them forward at great speed. There were also many travellers upon the road itself. Numerous people hurried along while riding tree men. Some rode vine men, though those moved more slowly. High above the sky, other divine arts practitioners rode upon flying beasts of every variety. Their wings shimmered with many colours as they reflected the sunlight, making them an eye-catching sight. It seems we are nearing a city, Qin Mu said with a soft sigh as he observed the increasing number of travellers. Suddenly, a loud clattering sound echoed through the air. Qin Mu turned his gaze and saw a strange spectacle. Numerous maidens burst out from a mountain pass and flipped several small hills aside as they rushed toward the main road. What carried those maidens was a gigantic chest more than 10 feet tall. It possessed long legs and ran swiftly across the ground. More girls emerged from a nearby village, yet the thing they rode upon was a wooden boat. The boat had grown legs of its own and was running across the land. Qin Mu stared in astonishment. It was as though the chest and the wooden boat had developed spirits and could sprint like the Dragon Qilin. The sight was incredibly bizarre. The world is boundless and full of wonders. The spells and divine arts used in other lands could also be applied within Eternal Peace, Qin Mu thought to himself. If this kind of spell were introduced into the Eternal Peace Empire, wouldn't that be marvellous? He blinked thoughtfully. However, it might also create quite a bit of confusion. Those with great magical power might even ride entire mountains around simply to show off. The girls were very curious about the Dragon Qilin, Qin Mu rode. The huge chest with more than a dozen legs ran over toward them. It was enormous, several yards long and wide. Silk cushions as soft as clouds were laid across its surface. 7 girls sat atop them while examining Qin Mu and the Dragon Qilin. The girl sitting in front was likely their leader. It was she who controlled the chest through her magical power, allowing it to carry them forward. Her smile was bright and charming. Beneath the tassels formed from silver pendants, her large eyes curved like crescent moons. Her voice carried the distinctive accent of West Earth, yet before she even spoke, she burst into cheerful laughter. "Little Bubba, your big pig runs really fast. Where did you find it?" Qin Mu was briefly stunned before realizing that Little Bubba likely meant little brother. He smiled politely and replied, "This is a Dragon Qilin, a mixed breed of dragon and Qilin." Xiong Chie poked her small head out from the Dragon Qilin's fur and looked around curiously. The girls were delighted by the sight of the little girl and wanted to hug and kiss her. Qin Mu felt somewhat helpless and allowed the Dragon Qilin to approach them. He lifted Xiong Chie up and placed her upon the chest. As he chatted with the girls, he discovered the reason for their surprise. They had been startled because he was travelling with Xiong Chie. The social customs of West Earth were quite different from those he knew. When a man and woman completed the ritual of visiting marriage, if they had a child, a son would be sent to live with the father while a daughter remained with the mother. This custom created a rather peculiar situation across West Earth. Many households consisted entirely of women or entirely of men, and numerous villages were populated solely by men or solely by women. When the girls saw Chinmu travelling with Xiong Chia, they assumed she was his daughter. Yet when they observed Chinmu more closely, his youthful appearance and radiant demeanour, they began to doubt their assumption. He looked too young to already have children, leaving them rather astonished. "Little sisters, may I ask you something?" Chinmu said curiously. He was still puzzled by the customs of West Earth. "I once met a girl who invited me to her house, but she told me not to enter through the front door and instead climb through her window. What kind of etiquette is that?" The girls burst into laughter. The leader's crescent eyes curved even more as she giggled. "Perhaps little Bubba isn't foolish after all. When a girl asks you to climb through her window, it means she wants to smooch with you, just like how the necks of mandarin ducks coil together while rubbing against each other." Chinmu scratched his head in confusion. What mandarin duck coiling? The leading girl suddenly leapt lightly onto the Dragon Chilin's head and smiled brightly. "Don't move." Then she leaned into Chinmu's chest and took hold of his hands, guiding them to rest upon her chest. She moved closer, her slender neck sliding into his embrace. Her face rubbed gently against his while their earlobes brushed together. The sensation was soft, warm, and indescribably intimate. Chinmu's face flushed red as he stood there awkwardly. All he could sense was the delicate fragrance of the girl. She laughed softly and jumped back onto the chest again. Seeing Chinmu's dazed expression, the other girls burst into loud laughter. "Big sister, has your heart been stirred? Why not bring him home for visiting marriage?" one of the girls teased. The leader glanced at Chinmu once more, and her heart was indeed somewhat tempted. She said hesitantly, "That depends on whether he's willing." The other girls nudged her mischievously. She pulled out a fragrant pouch and tossed it toward Chinmu while giggling. "Little Bubba, climb through my window tonight, and I'll teach you how mandarin ducks coil together." The women of West Earth were bold and fiery, far more daring than the girls of Eternal Peace Capital. Chinmu felt completely overwhelmed and quickly changed the subject. "Do any of you know how to reach True Heaven Palace?"